Let's get into the game. Obviously, for the Packers, it's winning in. The Lions, it's knock the Packers out and get some help, and then you get in. What are you expecting from Detroit?
What I'm expecting is kind of more of what we've seen so far this year. They're a team that really, as much as they trust themselves in the trenches, they want to play in the trenches, but it's a team that fancies itself more on the offense these days. I know Lions fans are perpetually now in a terror that offensive coordinator Ben Johnson is going to get a job somewhere else. I think he's still way too young and way too inexperienced on his resume to really do that, but there's no denying what they've been able to turn Jared Goff and this offense into. This is, again, a quarterback that was a cast off 2 years ago, and he's playing like he's got revitalized energy to him. He plays very well in the pocket. He has a lot of very different weapons to go to. There are some routes run by Amon-Ra St. Brown that are just unbelievably impossible to stop him from running. And even the ground game gets involved when they can. Like, I know DeAndre Swift kind of has had his struggles this year, especially where it comes to his primary game, which is bouncing to the outside. But, when it gets rolling, it gets rolling, and they were able to get Swift involved, against the Bears. That's a bad front seven, but still, like it's a Swiss Army knife of an offense. They're scoring touchdowns with their tight ends after trading TJ Hawkinson just because they can put someone like Brock Wright out there, and Brock Wright can block and catch passes, rather than where you'd put TJ Hawkinson out there and you knew that TJ Hawkinson was trying to catch a pass. It's an offense that not only blocks well, especially in the run block rates that they're able to throw up, but they're able to move as an entire 11-man unit on offense. It's not just send someone out deep and hope Goff hits them. It's getting the pass protection. It's getting the run blocking. It's getting everything singing in order for their offense. And I think that's kind of become the identity of the team in that regard. On defense, it's a little more hodgepodge. I trust the front seven to do very well. Not just in Aiden Hutchinson, who, in my opinion, unbiased opinion, doing national coverage as well that I do, Aiden Hutchinson is the defensive rookie of the year. I don't care about people saying, well, it's New York, they'll give it to Sauce Gardner. I don't care. Like, Aiden Hutchinson has, like, I think, if I'm not mistaken, about 8 sacks and 3 interceptions. And that hasn't happened since they started recording sacks back in 1982. Like, the man is very good at batted passes and sacks. And then you have someone like James Houston, which, if people don't know his name, is James Houston, Jackson State, late day 3 pick. He really only comes in what the Lions called NASCAR packages, or or not, excuse me, not NASCAR packages. That's for more run stuffing stuff. But like he comes in on third downs a lot of the times, and he has an ungodly amount of sacks for someone who doesn't play full games. And there was a lot of consideration when they drafted him. He had been playing, somewhere between linebacker and defensive end, and at Jackson State, he had made more of his bones as an edge. Lions picked him up, tried to use him as a linebacker, but now they're kind of using him as that edge linebacker, and it's working. Him and Aiden Hutchinson are just getting through a lot of pressure, and it also helps. John Kaminsky does that as well. Their entire defensive line works very well around the edges, and they're even getting a little bit of help now from the linebackers. Malcolm Rodriguez kind of dipped off a little bit, but Alex Anzalone is probably the kind of defensive leader of this team. Where the Lions are struggling on defense is the secondary. Jeff Okudah started this year working very well, but I think that's really he's been getting burned more than not lately, and they've had to rely on a lot of young cornerbacks and a lot of young safeties because a lot of their veterans just frankly aren't making the kind of plays, or they're getting burned a lot. And that's the part that I think, if anything for the Detroit Lions, really hurts them in this kind of game.
Forgot to unmute myself. Yeah, on the Packers side of things, I think that the game that they played in Detroit earlier this year was obviously their worst game of the season, but it had a lot of really lasting impacts on their team. They lost Romeo Dobbs. I think he spent 6 weeks around there out after that game. He got hurt on one of the first couple plays of the game. Christian Watson, he got hurt. I think he got a concussion in that game. He wound up getting a concussion. I think it was against Buffalo the week earlier, so he sat out for the rest of this game. Rashawn Gary tore his ACL, done for the year. Eric Stokes, I believe he had an ankle injury, done for the year. They lost, I think it was 8 different players due to injury in this game. And I think that this Packers team, although not necessarily great, I think they're a way better and a different team than the one we saw play against them against Detroit earlier this year. Defensive wise, they've been a lot more aggressive. They finally started to press using Jair Alexander. They saw it last week. Obviously, they were doubling Justin Jefferson for a lot of that game, but it was finally a game plan that looked solid enough. Offensively, the personnel has completely changed. Their top receivers by the end of that game were Samori Toure, who doesn't play a whole lot. There was Amari Rodgers, who's no longer on the team. Sammy Watkins, who's also no longer on the team. And Aaron Jones, I believe, left with an injury towards the end of that game as well. They feel as healthy as they've been all year. And again, the consistency has always been the thing with the Packers down the stretch. What team is going to show up? And I think obviously the Lions have had that sort of issue in years past as well, not necessarily as much this year. But the Packers being at home especially, and I hate that it's an element in the game, but it is an element in the game. The Packers do indeed get calls at Lambeau. I know a lot of Packers fans like to brush that under the rug, but it truly does happen. You look at the hands to the face call. What was that, 2019? Against
something like that. I think there was one at Ford Field as well, that it was like a phantom face mask call.
It was the one on the Rodgers Hail Mary.
Yeah. And I don't want to think of that.
Yeah. And so like it truly does happen where the Packers do get the whistle. I hope it doesn't happen, and I hate that it happens because I think all it does is bring a lot of hate to a team that granted a lot of people hate and they're looking for reasons to hate them, but I think it allows the game to, instead of analyzing the game, it's analyzing the refs. So obviously I'm hoping for no, horrible calls or anything like that. But I think the Packers truly now are a better team. They're undefeated in the Matt LaFleur era when they run it more than they pass it. I think they're 12-0 when they have more rushes than passes. And then even you look, Aaron Rodgers, although he still hasn't been great. He's not had another 3 interception game like he had in Detroit. And even watching it back last night, I just couldn't I couldn't believe all of the crazy stuff. It was the bounce off of, I believe it was I'm trying to remember what Lions player's helmet it bounced off of, got picked. Aiden Hutchinson picked him off as he was trying to throw it back across his body to David Bakhtiar. It was just a crazy, wild game. I think both of these teams, obviously record-wise, they're different teams than they were when they played earlier this season, which is why I think picking this matchup is way more difficult than it originally sounds. But I'm going to ask you to do it. Who do you have winning this game?
This is a rough one just because the fly in the ointment is that Panthers game. I've kind of seen what happens when the team gets into cold weather, but they've also had some cold weather in other places too that wasn't really much of an issue. And as many yards they gave up to Donta Foreman, who I know people were like, oh, you gave it up to Donta Foreman. Donta Foreman's good. But other than that, they've bottled up. They bottled up a lot of good running backs through these few weeks too. They bottled up Dalvin Cook. They stopped Justin Fields from running. I know he still got 130 some yards. I think most of that though came in the first couple quarters. But then after that, they forced him to throw from the pocket where they would just sack his ass repeatedly. And they stopped, the Jets run game. They stopped the Jaguars run game. I don't even think the Bills or the Giants really had much to say on the ground. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head how much Saquon Barkley ran for in that Giants game.
Wasn't a lot.
It was only 22 yards. So they like bottling up the run. They have big packages to stop the run, and they really like it because they don't have to rely on their secondary as much when it comes to stopping the run. So I think I think where it comes down to, it's a scary place to play for the Detroit Lions. The specters of years past hang over them. But this is not, as you say, as I heard after the Panthers game, and I know people keep bringing it back, it's not same old Lions. It's a very different team that has a lot of confidence about themselves, has a lot of positive energy about themselves, and this isn't the same Packers team because they've shown their weaknesses throughout there, and the fact that Aaron Rodgers really can't do Aaron Rodgers things, and he'll be affected by the cold too. Like I like the Lions in this game, I really do. I'm not being the homer at this at all. I try to do everything from a national side. I don't act like the fan except where asked questions about the fan. But when it comes to picking games and stuff like that, I am as neutral as all can get out, and I like the Lions in this game. I just think they have that kind of energy going about them. If you ask the fan side of me, I'm just glad that the fan me is glad the Lions are playing Aaron Rodgers. Because not that I care much for Jordan Love, but I just really didn't want any other kind of like a resurgence of the spirit of Matt Flynn. If you know what I'm saying. Like that was my dread coming into this game, is like, oh, maybe the Lions are going to have a playoff game on the line here. Aaron Rodgers is going to suck so much that Matt LaFleur is going to try out Jordan Love again, and suddenly he's going to be the second coming. Like Matt Flynn, and they've had their future secured, and that'll just feel like suck all the same. No, I'd rather, as the rational side of me says Lions to win. The fan side of me says I want to beat up Aaron Rodgers.
And I think that's so fair. He's been the NFC North for the most part, their boogeyman for the past whatever it is, 15 years. Obviously, there's been down years, and but he's owned the division for a while. The only team he really hasn't is Minnesota for the most part. But like Detroit and Chicago, he's had a lot of success against. Although Detroit has had the most success, I believe, out of them in Chicago. And Detroit, I think, is the team that I worry about. Like, I think every year the Packers play the Bears and they go down 7-0 and the Bears have the ball. And I'm like, yeah, that's just how these games go. And then, and then by the end of the game, the Packers are winning by 17. The Lions, truly, I have no idea how a lot of these games are going to go. I like the Packers in the game. I think that there is a little bit of bias on my side. And I'm trying to look at it from that national point of view. But I think that the Packers, it feels like a not same old Lions situation, but it feels like it is that like too big of a spot. And in my personal opinion, the Packers will obviously for their season's sake have to win this game. But with the amount that Aaron Rodgers has been talking this week about like being, no one thought we would be in this spot. It's like, you're not in.
Here's the problem. You're getting into what I would consider narrative takeaways, which are always good to write after the fact, but they're very bad for doing preview. You want to. I look at this game purely on a matchup standpoint. How are these teams going to match up very well? And for the Packers to really beat the Lions, they need Aaron Rodgers to throw down the field and to throw accurately and to do it like in a way that he really hasn't done this year. And they just don't have that in them. Narratively, I understand why people think this can go the way of the Packers or even go the way of the Lions, but I want to take those out of it because narrative is something we write after the fact. It's something that we make fit after the fact. We throw out the bad scripts. One of my teachers, one of the guys who helped mentors in my life, Rob Parker, would always tell me he'd go into any game before that game has even started, and he'd have 3 different stories for each team, so 6 total, 3 narratives if a team wins, 3 narratives if a team loses. He was always prepared for it. But that means no matter what he writes, 5 stories are dying on the vine and being cast to the pits of left of being forgotten forever. And that's why I always resist the narrative pull of these kind of games, because yes, national people are starting to hype this up as being the big moment. Are the Lions, is this too big of a moment for the Lions? Is this Aaron Rodgers' destiny to go back to the playoffs again? That can change on a dime. That can absolutely change on a dime. All that matters right in front of you is the matchup.
And I think with this particular matchup, Jared Goff has been very good with not turning the ball over lately. I think he only has a handful of picks
He has
since
not
that
had
Green
an
Bay game.
interception. He has not had an interception in the last 8 games.
So I think that goes back. Is that since the Green Bay game or since right after it? A couple of games after it. But the Packers over these last 4 games on their winning streak, they're plus 11 in the turnover differential category. And especially when you look at their turnovers, I believe it's 2 Rodgers interceptions. One of them came in Miami. And then the defense got the ball right back. And I think the exact same thing happened in the LA Rams game, or maybe I have that one flipped where it's the Rams, Baker threw a pick and then Rodgers threw another one. I think when it comes down to holding on to the ball, the Packers have been very good with that lately. And I think that the Packers defense has been extremely opportunistic when it comes to turnovers on these last ones. Like Kirk Cousins threw 3 interceptions and had a fumble. The Dolphins game, yes, Tua was concussed, but they still got 3 picks and also forced a fumble on Raheem Mostert. I think that with how their defense has been trending, whether it's luck or skill or they finally figured it out, whatever it is, the Packers defense has been clicking lately ever since that Eagles game. They really, granted, again, we talked about their competition in those 4 games earlier, Bears, Rams, Dolphins, Vikings, and it's not super great, but the Packers, what killed them last season was special teams. And really what you can say won them the game against the Vikings, or if not won them, at least put them in fantastic position to win, was their special teams. Yeah, they had the block punt, but they also had the kick return. Keyshawn Nixon has been fantastic this year. I think he's leading the NFL in kick return yards, and he's only been returning kicks so far this year since I think around week 10-ish, maybe not week 10, week 9 sounds about right, in that Detroit game potentially. And he has, I think he has 95 plus kick return yards in 7 straight games. And even Mason Crosby, who I had zero faith in making a 56-yard field goal, went out there and made a 56-yard field goal. Yes, and off the crossbar, but I didn't think he had that in his arsenal. I think that the Packers special teams being much improved from what they were last year and even earlier this season with taking Amari Rodgers off of punt returns, who, you know, had a handful of fumbles this year, had a bunch of fumbles last year. Keyshawn Nixon gives them the ability to start their drives instead of being, just taking the touchback on either a punt or a kickoff and being at either the 25 or the 20, gives them the ability to start in opponent territory, gives them the ability, like they did against the Dolphins, their first offensive drive. Yeah, they didn't turn it into points, but they started the drive on the Dolphins 6-yard line. Aaron Rodgers, before he even had 2 drives on offense, their team was up 14-3 because they got a pick 6 and they also wound up getting the kick return for the touchdown. I think that with how the team has been trending lately, and again, Rodgers has not been playing well, and maybe that is, on a Packers fan side of things, maybe that is a good thing, that they're not just having to ride the hot arm of Aaron Rodgers like 2016 or, 2020, all of these years that they've just like, it's like, all right, come save us. Maybe it is a good thing for the Packers that where their faith lies in their team isn't on Aaron Rodgers, and having Aaron Rodgers as a backup plan if the running game's not going well seems like it could be a good thing. Again, he played pretty putrid versus Detroit earlier this year with the 3 interceptions, but I think that with what he was working with, I don't want to say he played good. I don't even want to say he played okay or he played bad. But I think that the 3 interceptions, one of them was a fantastic play by Kirby Joseph, I believe, undercutting a throw to Tanyan. But some of the other ones, they felt a little flukish. I don't think that that's going to happen again. And yeah, he hasn't been superhero back-to-back MVP Aaron Rodgers, but I think that this is a game where he's going to show up because he's going to have all of his weapons. He's going to have his guys. He's going to be at home. Like he just is going to have a lot of these things that's going to make him feel comfortable. It's not the same offensive weapons around him that he had in that Detroit, or towards the middle to end of that Detroit game. I think that their rush offense, you highlighted a lot of, games where the Lions were able to slow down the run. And I believe that, including that Packers game where Aaron Rodgers was the leading rusher with 4 rushes for 40 yards, one of them coming on I think it was a 3rd and 17, which was a delay of game. I will say that it was 100% a delay of game. But I think that their run game and then the defense turning it around and special teams just not being the worst is what eventually would give them the edge in this game.
I think at some point you do need your quarterback to make those throws. It's something that I've wondered about for a while with Jared Goff. It is nice when you don't have to rely on your quarterback, but in this league, at some point, maybe it's not this game or at any other point, you are going to need to rely on your quarterback. There's a very few teams that have been able to do a lot in the NFL without that. Yeah, I think with the new offensive schemes coming out, that does change that. What am I looking for? What's the word I'm looking for? They changed that calculus a little bit, but not in what I'm seeing out of the Packers in that regard. I think Aaron Rodgers struggling cannot be spun in any good way for the Packers. Maybe they get through this game. I don't know. Maybe it is Lambeau. Maybe it is the home field advantage. Maybe it is, the Lions banged up on secondary a little bit too much to really stop that. But at some point, that Reaper will come due. And I think for the Packers, it's not this story can't end well for them. It just can't. There's too many other beasts in the NFC, and if they don't fall to the Lions on Sunday, then how are you going to get over the Eagles? How are you going to get over the 49ers? There's so many questions. How are you going to get over the Cowboys? There's so many questions to which I don't think the Packers really have answers. Now, granted, I'd still take either the Lions or the Packers in the playoffs over the Seahawks at this point. I think most of the country prefer the Lions or the Packers over the Seahawks in the playoffs. But I don't, neither of these teams, I think, be it the Lions, who have too many holes, who are too flawed on one side, nor the Packers, who their greatest asset is seemingly more interested in snorting. Do you snort ayahuasca? I don't think you snort ayahuasca. Whatever. He's such a damn idiot. He probably would try to snort it too, and then get another henna tattoo and talk about how he's got his third eye open while denying that vaccines work. He's such a goddamn idiot, and I can't wait for him to be gone. I'm sorry. This guy's a chump. He's a chump. He's a loser. I can't even say the word I want to say in my native tongue because I will be accused of horrible things if I say it about him. So just all the nasty kind of curses my grandmother would throw out belong to Aaron Rodgers at this point. Hate really does feed the dog.